Well, welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Jim Garlet. And we are going to talk today about a topic that was put in front of us. Jim read an article in Fast Company about personal branding, and we're going to reference it's nice, it's well organized, and it makes points that we agree with. So we're going to use it as a guidepost to wrap around our conversation. But to me, as we talked about, Jim, this really is about personal branding is about self-promotion. But in order to go through the process from my perspective of what is personal branding and how do I go about doing it, I really have to do some self-reflection and get to a point of self-awareness, because if it's not authentic, then it works against you. So you really, and that's some of what the article says about why some people, generationally speaking, that were used to working in corporations that wanted you to promote them and not you, and discouraged individuality. We're now in a world where that's kind of flipped upside down. So, Jim, I won't spoil the story by reading the article, but maybe you can reference it as you guide us through the conversation.
Yeah, well, Mark, first of all, thanks for kicking it off that way, because you kind of set this up nicely in that we often start off every episode with the self, because it's the center of the flywheel, right, of our other five areas of our life. And just right out of the gate, you came in and said, yeah, self-awareness, self-reflection. And today we're going to talk about self-promotion. And that's something that doesn't come natural, especially as we talked about earlier. It's a generational thing too. It was looked down upon in most of our life, or even in our business life. And yep, we've entered a new time. So I think it's a timely topic. And another thing I think we've both realized is that our flywheel, our framework that we talk about every week, is embedded in your personal brand. And again, I'll just go through that to remind it, no particular order, right? Mm-hmm. Our career, of course, right? Whatever that is, you're an entrepreneur, you're a corporate. Even if you're in corporate now, you have to have a personal brand. In fact, there's companies that specialize in CEOs' personal brands, even large mm-hmm. corporation. That's how important the personal brand is. And even if you're working for a company, say VP of sales and marketing, you have to have some brand exposure in order for people to want to even do business with you. So it's definitely part of one area of our lives, and that's profession. Second one, and yeah, your health, right? Your mental health, your physical health. I think that's what social media is about, and people want to know they're doing business with people that have a similar value, or they want to get to know you a little bit before they engage you and want to do business. And the other one is, they again, back to just others, people. They want to see maybe who you're married to, who you socialize with, and of course, social media makes that all available. But the other big one, and I think we all struggle with, is the worldview. Like, how much of your personal brand has to be connected to your worldview? Because if you pick it wrong, it's just say pick it wrong. I don't know if there's a wrong or a right anymore, but we're so divided as a country. If you decide to, in your personal brand, share your political views, right away, at least in some industries, you're going to eliminate 50%, if not 25%. Of potential customers, because they won't like you just because of who you associate your politics with. Mm-hmm. So that's the worldview is very relevant in your personal brand. Of course, back to your childhood, your spirituality, all those different things. The one thing that always holds true is people like to do business with who know, like, and trust. And yep, often they like and trust you because you have something in common that they do. They can relate to you in another way. So personal brand's a big deal right now.
It's and you and I have talked about it quite a bit. I've spent, I think, a longer period of time trying to figure it out, but you've become very interested in it as well, and I think rightfully so. I think the other thing that contextualizes our point of view on this topic is the fact that both of us are kind of lifelong entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So, we had some of this. We felt like we had to act a certain way in front of our customers or on behalf of our vendors or suppliers. Yep. But we were always doing our own thing, even though you were representing other people's brands,
Mm-hmm.
and I was representing my own brand. I always came at what I did for a living from it. This is me. You're doing business with me, and so you need to trust me. You
Mm-hmm.
need to be somewhat in agreement or aligned with my worldview, not necessarily, but probably most of the time, because people are human beings and they do make judgments on those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember you were telling a story briefly earlier about just what I just said, and it made me think of, I went to work for the company that bought my company, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And we were told all kinds of different things, right? And the owners were a husband and wife, and they were very successful. She said to me one day early on, "You're not supposed to be selling you. You're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be selling the company."
Interesting. So
And
this is the new owner that you sold the company to said that to you?
long time ago. Yeah, long
Interesting.
time
But
ago.
you were the owner of the company, and then when they assumed ownership, she was your boss, and that's what she told you.
Yes. Yes. I was taken aback by it because I had
Yeah,
spent my entire career.
building
uh,
the company that she bought.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and
What was
in
her
hindsight,
background? It's just not to get off topic, but interested in her background because this article speaks to this, right? This is a new time in terms of the old corporate way of thinking uh, uh, in relationship to what is going on today. And
yeah, she was a very powerful, successful woman, and locally politically involved.
yeah,
Everybody knew who she was, and she liked that.
yeah, she did.
She liked the fame.
Mhm.
I just remember, Jim, thinking to myself, my time is limited here because if I can't sell me, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
And I don't believe in some of the things that they do.
yeah,
They took a low margin, high volume approach, which I've never done ever.
yeah,
I like high margin, low volume, deep relationship, deep trust, authenticity stuff. I like
yeah.
transparency. So, go maybe what's the first thing on there is what we just talked about, this whole shift, societal shift in from corporate brand to individual brand. But there's a list of like 6 or 7 points. Is there
Yeah.
not in the article? Maybe you could bring up the first one and we can
Yeah,
bounce
yeah,
that around.
I'll just read them off, then we'll break them down. But the first one, myth number one: personal branding is selfish, and then it goes on to say it's actually especially it just talks about what you referred to. Um, let's see,
Just do.
I'll read it. So now that we've done the work, it's seen as if a process of self-discovery and growth, blah, blah, blah. A brand is basically a well-designed shortcut for telling people exactly who you are and what you care about. So, yeah, kind of the kind of the opposite of what that person says, right? Like the it's not selfish, but to build a brand, you have to convey to people exactly what they said, and that doesn't come natural. I grew up in a culture, a family that bragging was a bad thing. Self
Mhm.
promotion was not a good thing. I was looked down upon,
Same.
and I have to tell you, I fight that every single day. It's almost like it almost haunts me to some degree. But
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I think I don't know that I would say that it haunts me anymore, but I think it's one of those childhood experiences that kind of gets stuck in your DNA, and you kind of have to deprogram yourself if you choose to later on in life. There's so many things like that. But
yeah,
I was the same thing, no bragging. And matter of fact, my father would not tolerate us telling anyone what he did for a living. It's no one's business. You tell them I work in the sewer if you want to answer their question. You
yeah,
know, he literally would say that. And we didn't celebrate straight A's. We didn't celebrate big time wins. We real tiny celebrations. It was like, I think that's kind of also tacks back to my dad's religious background. And, self promotion is, when you're fasting, don't do it in public, do it in private, so, probably some of it came from there.
yeah. This is really interesting. Again, I'm just scanning this article, and it just says if we don't do this work, we pass the it gets defined. Let's see here today is defined what determinate. So that doesn't help anyone. Basically, what it's saying is if you don't do the branding, then it gets branded for you. That's just like any kind of marketing, right? If you
Yep.
don't market, then it doesn't mean there's not some type of messaging or marketing going on. You just can't
Yep.
control the narrative.
Yeah. No,
And
that's
that's
what it
what,
is. That's
yeah.
what it is. It is choosing to control your own narrative, I guess is a good
Mm-hmm.
way to say it.
Yeah.
But I think yeah, when I decided to do it, like I started writing a lot a few years ago online, just publicly online, as you know, and I
Uh-huh.
started shooting a lot of video, and I wrestled with all of these things before, and then it just became so clear to me, and then I had people start to tell me, "Hey, you're pretty good at this," which is helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because that means pretty good at it means I'm not coming off as arrogant or obnoxious. I'm coming off as authentic. And I
Yeah.
just really, that word authenticity resonates deeply with me. And I try every day to refocus my energies on that. But
Right.
yeah,
Kind of the opposite of what the corporate world is, right? It's not
yeah.
authentic at all. Myth number 2, why people with personal brands are loud and obnoxious. So that's,
Well,
again, they're breaking down the myths. That's what the
well, you
articles.
know what that makes me think of is salespeople are all obnoxious, and
Right.
that's not the truth. Many of them are, but I I I don't consider myself obnoxious, and I've been selling my whole life. And I've had that discussion with all my kids when they had to enter into the workforce and sell themselves. And of course, you know what I do for a living, Jim. So I've been helping people try to sell themselves my whole life. So it's just interesting.
It is interesting, but now in this world, you have to sell yourself too. So
You do.
I'll read one paragraph. Ultimately, how you implement your brand is up to you. Some people choose to build a thought leadership platform or becoming an influencer, but for most, it's is simply about becoming more deliberate, interacting with others as you build your career. Well, it's
Yeah, I
different.
think the thought leadership choice is the one that I've made. I think that you know, a lot of phrases that have been around for a while get misused, and just in general. And thought lead. I know that leadership is not a word that you're terribly fond of. Maybe you're shifting your view on that. Maybe you're not. But and I understand why. But it's just like the word salesman, right?
Yeah.
Salesman. People at least used to think, maybe still do.
Yeah.
That's the dude with the cheap suit and the white belt and the white shoes, you know, trying to manipulate you. And it's
Yeah.
I always felt, and this is part of hopefully part of my brand when the public considers me is I'm finding people that are already interested in what I have to offer, and then being conscious of trying to make it unique so that the impression they get is that I can only get this from Mark. I can only get this kind of thing from Mark. And I think that if somebody's already ready for what you have, those are the people that you want to be talking to, and that makes sales not obnoxious. That makes
Yeah.
sales not pushy.
But that also speaks to this article. If you don't go out there and create your brand, your personal brand, then they don't know who that is. And so if you don't write this content and push this content out, then they don't know. Like you said, you're doing a better job than I am. I just in the last couple of weeks have gone all in on it, to the point where um, breaking it down, creating a strategy. It's like anything. It's not something you can just do in your spare time. You have
No,
to commit to it and do
you,
it consistently,
yeah, you
but
need to do
with
it with,
an action plan and some kind of a framework.
yeah, you need to do it with a purpose. You need to have a plan, and you need to be deliberate about it.
Yeah.
But what's number three?
But myth number 3: personal branding is fake and disingenuous.
Well, that's back to the authenticity piece, and
Mhm.
that's the thing that the other part about our childhood. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but from you, but I was told to be polite. I was told to be respectful, particularly of my elders and people in positions of authority.
Mhm.
And as we speak, I currently have zero respect for people that are in positions of authority. And so, that one took me a while to get to, but I think no, I don't think that obnoxious or disrespectful or any of that stuff I'm trying to do the opposite of that, but I get where the reticence is, because you are, no matter how you phrase it, to your point, you are bragging about yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, no matter how you phrase it, right? And then there's the whole imposter syndrome, right? That's going to kick in eventually. Surprised it's not in this article somewhere. Maybe it is. So, myth number 4: branding is only for senior leaders and C-suite executives.
Yeah, I that's clearly not true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Even whether it even was one, and I think there people have been branding themselves personally for a long time outside of corporate America, like entertainment people and athletes, and
Yep. Yep.
they've been branding themselves for a long, long time. So I suppose it also has something to do with the industry that you play in, to how mature the model is. But yeah, yeah. Read that number 4 to me again.
Branding is only for senior leaders and C-suite executives. And
You
then
know,
I'll
I'm doing work, as you know, with a company right now that's a pretty big size, good sized company, and I'm playing with the C-suite people, and I'm playing with people down at the individual contributor level and everything in between. And it's interesting to watch how everyone feels about this issue. And I'm not teaching them how to personally brand themselves. I'm teaching them some leadership skills, which is, in my estimation, part of a good brand is that you send the signal out to the world that you are in fact a leader of some sort. Could be a thought leader, could be a leader of people, but it's so interesting because there's probably 10 people that I'm talking to right now, and they all feel very differently about this, and it's because of things
about
like
what?
worldview,
About their personal brand?
about
Speak differently
how
about what?
speaking up about things that are on their mind, right? And so part of that is sending a message to someone, a colleague, a supervisor, a superior of some kind. I think this is a good idea, and this is why. And it's amazing to me how reticent people are to speak up about things. And I think it's the imposter syndrome piece. As people move up the seniority level and gain confidence, I'm dealing with people that I've watched enter my world 6 months ago with a certain level of confidence and now be at another level of confidence 6 months later. And as they get more and more confident, they feel more comfortable speaking out with some authority about a specific issue. And to me, that's just like personal branding. You have to gain that confidence, you have to develop that authenticity, and then you have to go and face the world and potentially risk embarrassment or failure or anything that comes with taking a risk. And I just find that whole thing fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's very different inside of a company managing your career versus creating a personal brand. But personally, that's how I feel. It's very
There
different
are there are differences, but there
circumstances.
are
So
also
I don't understand
similarities.
the connection of how you communicate within your own internal corporate hierarchy or structure to building a personal brand. But I think I understand what you're saying. I'll read one here. Regardless of their role, industry, or experience levels, people with a strong personal brand tend to be centered, intentional, and real. More importantly, encouraging their their people to spend the time to understand their individual strengths, styles, and values can help cultivate authentic leadership and a great space for diverse perspectives and personalities to thrive. I think that's good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's the kind of the comeback on the myth. So, all
What's the
right.
next one?
Oh, I think we're out.
Well, what I was
Four.
thinking of
There's four
is
myths. Yeah.
you mentioned it earlier before we started recording. I think it bears mentioning again, and that is this whole issue of worldview. And I was actually going back and forth on LinkedIn with somebody about this just the other day. Some people felt strongly that you shouldn't bring your worldview into marketing conversations or branding conversations or sales discussions or anything corporate wise, and other people were saying, no, I feel the opposite way. I feel the opposite way. So
Mhm.
I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Oh, again, all your all your questions are timely, Mark. uh, I really, at this moment, and I'm, again, subject to change without notice. I'm going much more, not in the center politically, just I don't see an upside or the value in engaging politics with engaging somebody with the politically driven, particularly emotional, because politics become very emotional in any circumstance, even friendships. I mean, unless it's like a friend of mine and we know politically we are already aligned, then we can have fun talking about things. You and I can do that very well. I enjoy that. But that's very different than, let's just say, a business situation. There is no upside, at least the world I live in right now, particularly here in Northern California. There is no upside in trying to share an opposite position in politics. You're not going to change anybody's mind. Even if you tried to, you're going to step in some areas that you don't want to be in, and that you may never be able to get out of. So that's.
I think the most important part of that phrase was particularly here in California,
Northern California. I said, just to clarify, particularly here in Northern California, because there are parts of California and Southern California, particularly that are, it's like a different planet politically.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I have a particular position on this that's kind of developed over time. Because at some point you have to kind of make a choice, and I don't think one way is wrong and the other way is right. I think you just have to be prepared for the consequences of your choice, which is essentially true of any critical choice you make in life.
Yeah, really.
You got to be ready for the consequences, because everything comes with consequences. And I was reading some really, really authentic brand stuff from a couple different people whose names I can't remember, but one of them is very adamant about the fact that when you piss off half the population, the other half of the population becomes more attracted to you, right?
Yeah, as long as that's your customer base, that's a good thing. But if it's not your customer base, that's a really bad thing.
I think that in what I'm doing, so I'm dancing around in the leadership space and the career space, and I think that's and everyone that's out there as a potential customer for me, as I see it right now, based on just doing research and digging in, is about half the people out there agree with me and half of them don't. And so, and when I think about that, and there's 330 million people in the United States, that's 115 million people that I get access to. I only need 1,000, a couple hundred, So you really have to think that through. But I think once you commit one way or the other, I think you got to go all in, and the other thing that I do, which I try to do, is when I see something that's presented to me as political, I don't address it or observe it or look at it as if it's political. I think where is the common sense practicality of this? Does this make practical sense to me? And then I've said this to you before. Do I need to do more investigation and research? Do I have enough time? Do I care enough about the particular topic? But I never accept anything at face value, and I suppose I never have. So
let's take that word practical and run with it, because I think this sets this up nicely, or frames the conversation about politics or worldviews. Right? You said, is it practical? Here's what's not practical: to engage somebody with a conversation, knowing that we only have one vote. So let's just talk about being the president of the United States, or even local policy, which comes around every year or two, right? Not even that. So in terms of being practical, what is the benefit of engaging somebody in a political argument? Is it to get them to change their vote so it matches yours? So then maybe your political opinion could be implemented. See, this is why I bring this. I think it's a healthy conversation. Yeah. When you start to talk about we're talking about politics right now. How practical is it to have the conversation? My opinion right now, Mark, is it's not practical at all. There is nothing practical about it, unless I was to start a PAC, or unless that was my job, was to go try to sell people on votes. But that's not what I'm doing. So
Well, and I understand what you mean by that. I totally understand what you mean by that, and I think that's another choice that you have to make. I mean,
Yeah.
because if you choose to have conversations with people that are opposed to you, it's gonna be frustrating. It's
Oh,
gonna
and
be
it's
very
going to be very
frustrating.
frustrating. And you
Yeah.
and whatever topic or issue that you were originally trying to have a conversation with or a mutual exchange of thoughts and ideas, it's
Mm-hmm.
out the window. And full disclosure, I do the same. If
Yeah.
somebody is so um, far to the left or far to the right that they can't even form they can't even create they can't even articulate a position on an issue.
Well,
It's only driven by uh, a word or their trigger words that just set them off. Then I say to myself, that's not somebody I really would want to continue a relationship with, even if it's business. I
yeah.
don't really want to, because it's just a matter of time before that same personality or those same characteristics pop out in other issues, right? So
I think about it as you're talking. I think about it, and since we're on politics and personal branding, I mean, look what's happening right now with Kamala Harris and with Donald Trump and with both the
sure,
VP
yeah,
candidates. Now they're all trying definitively in the case of JD Vance and this other guy Peltz or Waltz or whatever his name
yeah,
is. Nobody really knows who they are that isn't in their community, so they're creating their brand, whereas Trump and Harris are more like polishing their brand. And I think that one of the things that I really wish everyone would stop doing, but particularly Donald Trump, is calling people names,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because now we're not talking about whether we should trust you. We're not talking about whether we
mm-hmm.
should have confidence in you, whether we will follow you as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
whether you'll keep us safe and you do the things that you're supposed to do. You just sound childish. And it's
But,
like we have this opportunity right now to
yeah,
really elevate his brand, but we
yeah,
can't do it without him, you
yeah.
know?
And
And
childish is the right word.
mhm.
It's everything's been dumbed down to a 10-year-old. And at first it was kind of funny and entertaining. Now it's just sad. It's sad, and it's a waste of time to be calling each other's names across the playground, right?
Hey, everyone has formed their opinions about Donald Trump, and most people have formed their opinions about Kamala Harris. And I don't need to know anymore what you think of the other person. I'm far more interested in knowing what you stand for, because
Yeah.
that's the only thing that matters to me. I don't care about either one of their personalities.
Yeah.
I care a little bit about their potential intellects, but what I really want to know from a personal brand standpoint is, what do you stand for? You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah, see, the conversation goes nowhere, Mark, in most cases with politics. Even if you're in full agreement with somebody, eventually you just run out of saying the same thing over and over again. And
I've had
there's nothing that we're going to do today that's going to have a direct impact on the outcome of that election.
See, I think I mean, I know that we don't agree on that. And I've said to you many times, I completely understand the position that you're taking, and understand why you're taking it. And I've had
But
this
is it
conversation.
practical? Is it a practical position?
I think it's a personal decision you have to make. I mean, practical is, does it make sense? If it's me, does it make sense for me? And in many instances, it does make sense for me, because I'm redefining and speaking about my brand. This is how I think. This is how I communicate. This is why I think this way is effective. And I think the biggest thing
So
that
I appreciate what you're saying. So you're saying that by including your politics in your brand, that's a practical way to convey your authentic self, or
it's part of it. It's
yeah,
part of it. Yeah. But
I see.
it's also very much how I say it too, because I don't call people names. I mean, I'll do that in private with you, just because
But
it's
once
funny.
they know that you are different than them as far as their political views, I don't think they're listening to a word you say. That I think that they're pretty much going to turn you off. If they disagree with you politically, they're not doing business with you.
That certainly is probably the case most of the time. But
Yeah.
back to what I was gonna about to finish, was the idea of asking questions. I think instead of telling people how you feel, is asking questions. Like if someone were to say to me, what do you think about climate change? I'm going to say, well, let's define what we're talking about first. What does that mean to you? So it's like if you threaten someone or you accuse someone or you call someone names and you take your position that way, then I 100% agree with you. But if you open up a conversation and just start to experiment, like you're not really sure where this person stands, you kind of can presume based on a couple things, but you need to know more. I like those, and I've had quite a bit of. I've been quite effective in many of those. You remember that monthly thing I did where I'd go to the library on Thursday nights and we'd talk about politically opposing views, and it was civil discourse was the goal. Talking to people that didn't agree with you. And in that forum, Jim, I was given the microphone every so often when I chose to raise my hand, and I would say something and at the end of those things, almost every single one of them, I had at least one person come up to you that was classified themselves as liberal and said, I really appreciate the way you articulated your position on that. I've never heard that before. And I hear I've never heard that before a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I hear is, are you sure that's true?
No, so that's progress. Because like you said,
that means someone's listening. That means they're listening to me.
Well, it means they're listening. And maybe, like you said, you did reshape their perspective. And that's practical if you can do that.
And that's why I find it practical. Do I expect them to actually take action or do something differently? Maybe, but I don't really care about that. But I guess
just tying this back to the topic of the day, and that's personal brand.
Yep.
How does that tie into your personal brand? You think it's important to weave that into your personal brand, your political views?
Not always. No, not always. I think, if we took the wheel, that worldview is what we're talking about now, but specifically politics, because worldview does encompass other things. It's like if you're Jewish and you're liberal, I've always struggled with how that could be, but it's an interesting conversation, and Catholics have a reputation and Muslims have a reputation. But I also think, like, if you're in the physical fitness space or you're in the psychology space, your personal brand physical fit, you got to look good. You got to look like you're fit, right? And that's part of your brand. And if you're in the psychology space, you have to sound rational. That's got to be part of your brand, and the way that you look at money, that's going to come up in conversations. You're looking for people that are in states of abundance, right? That if you're selling stuff, you're looking for people that are in states of abundance or aspiring to be more abundant, higher performers, right? And so, and your profession, well, we started off with that. I think that you and I have a particular view of personal branding because we were entrepreneurs, but we were raised generationally by men that didn't brag, that didn't promote themselves, that just went about their business and quietly and didn't expect accolades, weren't looking for credit from other people. They just wanted to put food on the table and take care of their family and do the right thing, whatever that was. So it touches on all four, and back to circle back to how we started. And because I do this with every one of my clients, it's the first thing I do is we have this kind of self-reflection conversation, which is, okay, what's going on? Where are we? How can I help? Tell me more. And I do that question thing over and over and over again. And then I end up, after gathering enough, observing enough and questions enough, getting enough answers, now I have an understanding of, it's in part the personal brand of the person that I'm coaching up. And then part of what I do, because you have to develop a story when you go on interviews to get work, is what's your personal brand? What's your story?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. If I think about it, that's really what you've been doing for the last 30 years is creating a personal brand for every one of your clients.
Yep.
And then selling that personal brand to a potential employer. And yeah, interesting. I think about that. So here's the question for you then. If you're so you have a new client, right? You on your side of the business, you refer to the client, to the talent, right? To the potential employee. Is that?
Well, it's both. It's both the client looking to hire the candidate and the candidate looking to get work. And so
the candidate. So I'll refer to it as the candidate. It is your client A. Let's just say client A, right? When you put together, again, unofficially, personal brand, we're calling it a personal brand today, but what did you call it in time? Is it a resume or a
No, it's more your story, and the way I look at it is your story in this particular circumstance. Your resume is part of the story,
I see.
maybe the least important part, in my humble opinion.
But you call it the story.
Who you are and what you do and why you do it is the story. But there's also other components of the story. Maybe one of the bigger ones is, why are you looking? Why are we here talking? Why aren't you enjoying what you're doing? Or tell me that story.
Yeah, I know that's what you do for them to get them ready, for the interview or whatever
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity is. The question I have, and I'm trying to set you up here, so just full disclosure on it. When you put together their story, because again, you've done this, I would imagine, hundreds, maybe thousands of times.
Thousands,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, thousands of times. And you do this you customize this for every single candidate. Going through this topic of today, as far as our personal brand, do you include politics in their story? Have you ever include politics in their story?
No, never. I don't. Yeah, that's a good point. That's an interesting. I don't know if I told you, but I was just talking to a kid the other day, and he was referred to me by a good friend of mine. And
but hold on, I want to just finish this thought before we get off to this other topic. So
it's the same topic.
Okay, but you've never included their worldviews in their story when it's related to a job.
I've never tried to extract their worldview from them.
Yeah.
So because I don't care,
but
I want to know how they think, but not about politics. I mean, if they want to tell me, I'm happy to listen, because I can gain insights to some extent. But I don't tee up the topic of politics or worldview,
Interesting.
But I think you have to get a sense too, though, or you should try, is the worldview of the candidate consistent and compatible with the worldview of the company that I'm going to have them talk to?
I see what you're going now.
Culture is part of worldview, right?
And that's your job, is to find that alignment, is to find that match.
Part of it.
But the story isn't part of that. That's just what you do, because you know how important culture is. And if you don't get that right, then that's not good for both clients, right? You're
right. Yeah. No, the cultural match is it might be even more important than the skill match, and certainly character and integrity. But the story I was about to tell real quickly is exactly about this topic. Mm-hmm. This kid was referred to me. I didn't know who he was. It was a favor I was doing because he was the good friend of a friend of mine's daughter. And I help my kids and their friends all the time with this kind of stuff. Yeah. So he gets on the phone, and I go to look at his LinkedIn profile, because I do that with everybody before I talk to him. And he's got a Black Lives Matter banner all the way across his LinkedIn profile. And
is he black?
No. And I had to think to myself, are you going to mention this? And I thought to myself, yes, but I'm not going to do it politically. I'm going to do it pragmatically. And as we walked around his LinkedIn profile, I said, do you want my advice on this profile? Because I've looked at it. He said, yeah, I don't use it that much, but I'm going to have to start using it more. I said, yeah, I think you probably are. I said, among other things, I would lose that banner. I said, it alienates 50% of the population, and it serves no purpose for you whatsoever. It doesn't.
I can't wait to hear what he said. What did he say?
Nothing.
Nothing like F you, dude, or nothing like
nope.
I fucked up. Which nothing is it?
We went from conversational to he wanted to get off the phone. So I politely suggested that I would send him a couple of things. I didn't belabor the point. I just, and what I said was 100% true. So it's, I might be off by a percentage.
But he wanted off the phone at that point.
Yeah, I was done. And I knew that was
done, or he was done, or you were both done.
I knew that was I would stay on if he took that like a man, so to speak. Like, okay, hey, that's a valid point. I can understand that. I mean, I might not listen to it, but I know what you're saying, and I'm willing to. I'm willing to
Mark,
take
I
that
think that was
risk.
appropriate. If you took it like a man, I think that's appropriate. I'm laughing because I appreciate the authentic response because
So, I mean, look at the context of that. That's somebody who's, I mean, why would you lead on your LinkedIn profile with anything political? I mean,
yeah.
unless you're pushing a political agenda, right?
Well, he clearly was, and he clearly is irritated that he can't find a job with a company that values that as much as he does.
Well, I texted my
By the
friend
way,
back.
wasn't that like, I don't know, a decade ago, that BLM thing, or what?
Dude, that's just topic for another
Wasn't
time.
that
I
wasn't
just
that
want to.
yesterday though? I mean,
Yeah, that's
obviously I'm exaggerating but come on, update your shit, right?
well, that I mean, your LinkedIn profile talking about personal branding, and
Oh yeah,
maybe this is worth saying, even though it sounds so obvious to me because I work in that world. It's like I will never talk to anybody without trying to find them on LinkedIn first. If I don't know them,
yeah, well,
I'm always looking for some context. That's your professional brand, and it's
yeah.
partially your personal brand. So you really, if anybody's out there looking to attract eyes in any capacity for the purposes of selling or interviewing or whatever, you better look at that LinkedIn profile like it's your special personal brand,
Yeah.
because it is.
Yeah.
It is.
One last question, and then we'll wrap this up. Speaking of LinkedIn personal profile, because like you said, it's probably the number one place to start with your personal brand. A side note, mine's about 2 years old, so I need to update mine right now. But who is best to write your LinkedIn profile? Certainly not yourself in some cases, right? That's just, you're too close to it. Is there, and then who you choose to do that? What is the main objective? And boy, that's a difficult decision, because if you hire the wrong person with the wrong perspective, let's just use your conversation you had about the BLM thing. If that person, let's say worldview, or their view of the world is a certain way, and they're writing your LinkedIn or helping you craft your LinkedIn profile, that also may come out awkward as well. So I never thought about it, but that's a very difficult decision of who's going to be your editor and who's going to craft the final LinkedIn.
I would say this, Jim, and it's the same to me about who's going to help you write your resume, right? So I tell people your resume and your LinkedIn profile should be very consistent. They should look the same. There'll be different bits and pieces and different functionality, but the user experience should be pretty much the same, the content. But what I would do if I was in a position where I didn't have a lot of LinkedIn experience, and I do, so I'm a little bit jaded, I would say, and to your point, you want to go fix yours up because it's been a couple of years. So what would I recommend you to do?
My recommend is who would you hire an editor? Would you try to do it yourself? How would you select somebody to do that? That's the question. I'm not looking for advice as far as what to do right now. I'm looking at advice in terms of how to do it.
That's where I was going. So I would say I would go online and I would Google LinkedIn experts, and I would do a little bit of research, and I would look and maybe find 3. And I'm telling you right now, Jim, it's so easy to determine whether someone's going to be able to represent your worldview or avoid your worldview in their editorial process very quickly. And I would then say I would look at their stuff. They all have a free workbook or whatever that you can use, and then they'll help you in person for money.
You would Google it. You wouldn't go to LinkedIn and do it.
That's part of what I would do too, because LinkedIn has a lot of recommendations, but you're playing to their algorithm if you do that, which in some cases is fine. But in some cases, I don't care about the algorithm. That's not my point of view. So I just gather a couple of different opinions, and I know a couple people just from doing just that. And they all seemingly have the same recommendations. But in terms of how to utilize the tool, LinkedIn is very good at help videos and training videos. So between those resources, and then I would take that information and I'd do the work myself. So it was all my voice.
I see. Yeah. Good advice. So. All right, Mark. I think that was a good one.
Yeah, that was good. Hopefully it was helpful to the people that are listening. So we'll talk next week, Jim.
Sounds good.
Thanks, man.